Hello folks, this is Glenn Guy, your travel photography guru. Today's presentation, titled Photographing from the Heart, is based on St Thomas Mount in Chennai, India. Some of you may know Chennai by its former colonial name Madras. Chennai is situated in southeast India and is the site of the martyrdom of St Thomas, one of the apostles of Christ, also known as the Doubting Thomas, from which that term originally derived. So the images in today's presentation are from the Holy Apostle Convent, which is based on St Thomas Mount. This is where the nuns and lay workers look after a group of around 30 children, from babies up till about 6 years of age, I believe. I used my Canon 5D Mark II camera and a Canon 24-105 f4 L-series lens, which has become really my de facto standard lens for most of the work I do with this particular camera. I was shooting indoors and outside towards the end of the day, so the light levels were quite low. So I was working from between ISO 200 up until ISO 800, and from that was achieving shutter speeds of around a tenth of a second up to an 80th of a second. Most of the shots from memory were about f4, which is using that lens at its maximum aperture. Well, it's interesting to know how people would respond to an image like this. We have to remember, of course, where the photo's made. India, of course, has a rapidly growing economy, particularly for the middle and upper middle class. But we have to remember that the country still has millions upon millions of poor and lowly paid workers. My understanding is the children that are looked after by the convent are there on temporary basis. Their parents, probably both working, are just not in a position to provide care for the children themselves during the working hours. So the kids are looked after by the nuns and lay workers. The day when I visited was very interesting because many of the parents were there, their regular weekly visitation, and they were spending time with their children. And it was particularly touching, you know, as I started to do some photography outdoors of the kids. It was just after the parents had officially left the complex, and I remember seeing a number of them standing around the gate, kind of looking through the gate at the kids, and it was obvious that they didn't want to leave. As I say, kids, babies up until about 6 years of age. The staff there are wonderful. It seemed to be a very safe location, and the kids seem to be very happy and well cared for. Play seemed to be an important part of the day, and that was very reassuring. Here's a few shots taken around the complex itself. This is the kitchen area. Basic, I suppose, from Western standards, but nevertheless serves its purpose and was kept exceptionally clean. One of the activity rooms for the children. And this was a close-up in the kitchen area, actually. A still life. So let's talk for a while now about my approach to photographing the children. I think it's important to be conscious of trying to tell stories through your photographs, particularly if you're looking at putting a series of images together. There's many approaches to telling a story. It doesn't have to be a literal telling of event. What we're really doing is making images that communicate a message or a theme to a wider audience, achieved simply by spending a few minutes looking at the pictures that move you, looking at the work that you would like to do yourself to emulate, and then working out what is it in that work that moves you, that touches you. And if you think it through, if you write it down, you'll then find that over time you'll start to incorporate that approach into your own image making. If you love kids, you'll be inspired to act. So was obviously important to get, particularly in this modern world, to get permission to photograph the children, and I made sure I did that. And I also had one of the nuns or staff member with me all the time when I was making the pictures, which is good to know. So the kids are looked after all the time. For me, it was very straightforward. I believe my motivation is pure, and so will my photos be. I went there with a particular outcome in mind, and it was just a matter of taking action to achieve that outcome. So my mother, Mary Guy, through a charity business that she ran for a number of years called Namaste. It was a retail shop in our hometown Hamilton in Western Victoria. I think she ran it for about 18 years. She basically worked full-time without pay for that entire period. She would purchase goods often directly from local industries in countries like India, direct from the villages in many cases, would sell the products in Australia. So we're talking about jewellery, handicrafts, clothing and the like. And then incense, I remember. The profits from those sales would go directly back to support various charities. So my intention really for visiting India on this particular trip, I believe it's my 4th trip to India, was to visit several of the charities that my mum had supported over the years, and then make photographs that would communicate some of the value of her work, firstly to my nieces and nephews. I have 11 of them, so they would have some understanding of the legacy that my mother's left behind, but also then, of course, through the power of the internet to a much wider audience. So the approach for making these pictures was using the lens generally at the widest possible aperture, in this case f4, and there were 2 reasons for that. One was to gather sufficient light to make a sharp enough picture without moving the camera, and the second reason, of course, was to create a shallow depth of field. So our eyes may move around the frame, but they're always coming back to the sharpest part of the picture, which is in this case the eyes of the child in the foreground. And the lighting was very straightforward, window light coming in the room, bouncing off various walls and creating a lovely soft light on the child's face. They really were beautiful kids. I shot in colour, but in some cases converted a few images to black and white for variety, but also because in some cases there seemed to be a different mood that was being explored in the photograph. And also where the photographs had very strong dominant shapes, in this case the young girl's face, her eyes, a mouth, very strong shapes, then they're always good candidates for black and white. You can see the shallow depth of field working well here because the 2 shapes in the background are in fact nuns who have been placed way out of focus, and instead of being distracting elements, they're now background for the child. So my approach when photographing people is to concentrate on the intimate moment, and that word, all it really means is that you're cutting out superfluous information, information that just doesn't help communicate your core message. And so sometimes that would be achieved by zooming in. I like to move in closer and effectively frame out distracting elements. Using shallow depth of field again to concentrate attention on the key focal point, the key subject area of the picture, and often looking for delicate gestures just to emphasise an emotion. And of course identifying eyes that are expressive and then focusing on those and making sure they're well illuminated. So, I'm looking all the time for interesting subjects, deciding that at that particular moment this child is ideal to photograph, moving in close, establishing a rapport with the child, and then through a variety of techniques eliciting an interesting expression and of course trying to capture life in the eyes. Timing's critical to be able to achieve that, so you've got to have all the camera work organised, make sure that the child is moved into appropriate light, and then do what's needed to get that expression, to get the light in the eyes. So being a kid at heart helps. expression, the lovely cute mouth and teeth there. That's what made the image a moment in time. Again, very shallow depth of field, blurring out otherwise distracting background elements. And as I often do, moving the central focal point just off centre, because if you're always putting the most interesting element in the centre of the frame, it tends to make the images look quite static, often boring. So you get a little bit more dynamic by moving the central element just off the centre of the frame. So it's my view that the camera's a passport. It opens up new worlds and new possibilities for the photographer. It opens doors into other people's lives and thereby helps us better understand the human condition. So how can we make a difference in our own photography? Well, hopefully you've enjoyed the few images I've shared with you in today's presentation, and I'd like you to take a moment for yourselves and just breathe, just think about what you've seen, and if you've enjoyed the images, maybe just in point form, jot down a few points as to what you liked about them. If they've moved you, you might think about what it is in the image that you find interesting or attractive, motivational, and then come up with a basic plan for how you might incorporate this into your own photography. So what is there in your own neighbourhood, in your own area, that you might be able to photograph in a similar way and achieve great results? Of course, if we can achieve it on the local stage, it'll give us that much more chance of being able to tell great stories when we next travel. And a personal philosophy is there's so much negativity in the world around us. The immensity of the task just seems beyond us, but all we have to do is concentrate on our own needs. First of all, get ourselves sorted, and then with a more positive outlook, we can then go about doing things for other people that will make a positive difference to their lives. Of course, the gesture is always appreciated, and there are many forms of gesture. We can make donations to worthy charities. We can spread the word about images that we've enjoyed online through Facebook and Twitter. That doesn't cost anything. We all need to take care what we read and watch. It's important to be able to absorb media actively rather than passively. And so by that I mean it's simply a good practice to think about what it is we're reading or watching on TV. Our cameras are a wonderful tool, and I believe they can become a force for change through the photographs we make. It's my belief that each of us has the power to heal the world, one photograph at a time. I'd like to take a moment to give special thanks to the management and staff of the Holy Apostle Convent in Chennai, India, and in particular to Mother Lourdes, my local contact, who spent a lot of time helping me out and was a wonderful source of inspiration because I was quite ill at the time. We had a lot of fun together. And there's Mother Lourdes. And as you can see, she radiates joy and positivity. She was a fantastic companion during my time on St Thomas Mount. I hope you'll take time to pop over and look at my blog, which is updated almost on a daily basis at travelphotographyguru.com. You'll also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/travelphotographyguru. And Twitter, twitter.com/travelphotoguru. Finally, thanks for spending the time watching this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll pop back regularly for a whole range of inspirational and educational photographic presentations. Thanks so much.